All right. Welcome into another episode of Hockey Royalty Live, the official podcast of hockeyroyalty.com. Not much to talk about today, but I think we're going to get into some trade stuff. Jonathan Quick traded. We're getting Gavrikov and Coppercillo back. Eric Portillo coming over for a third-round pick, as well as what could happen in the future. The Trickern drama ends. Lots of stuff to get into. So like, subscribe, tell your friends, tell your mom. We're about to talk some Kings hockey. Well, what a crazy day. You know, we were talking, I was thinking this morning, or last night, it's like, what are we really going to talk about? Like, this road trip sucked. All this kind of stuff like that. Like, what is there really to talk about, you know? And I don't want to be a Debbie Downer on the pod and all this kind of stuff. Then just boom, just all these emotions, Joe. All these emotions come in on Wednesday. Man, what a crazy 24 hours, man.
So, for those that listen to the pod, they know I'm on the East Coast. So this was a game at a reasonable hour against Winnipeg. Late comeback. They win in the shootout. I'm like, this is what a great way to go to bed. Right? Go to bed in a good mood, ready to get after it for the next day. I wake up and I'm like in this haze of what the hell? What am I reading? What happened? I didn't go. I went to bed at it was like 11:30. I thought it wasn't early, but it wasn't that late. But then again, 3 hours makes a big deal. And I honestly didn't know. My initial reaction was I just think kind of in shock that Quick was traded for a number of reasons. The kind of sentimental, emotional part has kind of hit me at random spots throughout the day where it's like, I'm taking my kid to soccer today and it's just, I had this flash of Jonathan Quick, throwing it, barking at an official because his helmet was off or something like that, that fiery Jonathan Quick, that battle. It's that's gone, you know? So these random moments have kind of popped into my head over the last, all day. But initially it was just this what is going on and what is happening? So I don't know what you thought, but what a crazy, crazy thing to wake up to.
Yeah. Before I get into what I thought, I just want to thank you everybody for coming in the chat. Shankmaster was coming in here early, dropping it in there at 8:40. It'd really be good if Blake would make a bold deal to shock Kings fans. Any ideas of what that might look like? Well, I think we got that. CJ coming in here. No worries. We started a little bit late. Johnny Van Potna coming in here. Woo, what a rush. Hey, boys. Jael, always listening. Thank you. Appreciate it. CJ F. Armstrong. Just wanted to get that out. He's talking about the GM of the Coyotes for making us wait for that bad return, in my opinion, but we'll get to that later. My reaction, for everybody listening, this is not going to be a Jonathan Quick homage podcast. We'll get to that, break down the top moments like we did with Brown, really go through his career and everything like that. I think a lot of people are still in shock about this. This is mainly about the trade here. As far as the trade goes, I didn't think that this would ever happen, to be honest with you. I thought that they seemed to be really going forward with hey, we're going to allow these core guys to retire as Kings. And if we do trade them, they're going to have their spot in mind and all this kind of stuff. And so when I woke up, I found out through my group text with my brothers that hey, Quick been trade, they were up before me, and I don't know, it just seems like it's one of those things where on paper, taking emotions out of it, if you're a robot, it's okay, the Kings got better. But when you're trading away a guy who probably single-handedly carried us in 2012 with one of the best goalie performances in a playoff I've ever seen, and then again in 2014. It's he's the best goalie in Kings history, right? And so I just think it's just tough. It was just instant this morning. And like you said, emotions were I almost wanted to just step back and be well, let me just not react to this trade in the chat or drop F-bombs or do whatever that a lot of people are doing on Twitter and just kind of take the whole day before I post my reaction. And like my first reaction to it was when Columbus might be trading him to Vegas. I was like, man, dude, if Jonathan Quick just has this, I'm so pissed off, I'm going to do whatever it can to make them prove that I can still play hockey, and leads Vegas to a Stanley Cup, I might jump into oncoming traffic, is what I wrote, and but I just think, man, with this trade, it's just so weird. Like I expected Muzzin and Toffoli and all those guys to leave because we were rebuilding, right? I didn't expect this. I thought Jonathan Quick was going to do a Brownie moment a week before the season ends in the regular season, be like, hey, I'm going to be retiring. I didn't want to be a distraction and say this earlier in the season and all this kind of stuff. And then kind of just ride off into the sunset, whether he was a backup goalie or not in the playoffs. At least he was with the boys in his final ride. And now we're not going to get that. I mean, I assume, I don't know. You don't really see it a lot in hockey. You see it a lot more in like baseball and football, where they sign a player to like a 1-day contract to retire with the team that drafted him. I wonder if they'll do something like that. And obviously he probably gets his number retired and all that jazz. Yep. But just like the initial reaction, I don't know. Like, it was just kind of like a weird thing. Like, okay, you know me, I was boomer bust. Like, it's Chychrun or not, right? Or go get Soros. Like, throw these prospects and go get it done. We didn't get Chychrun. We didn't get one of the top goalies in the game. I think we got better as a team, but it's like it wasn't the boom trade that I was thinking we would get. And then you trade away a player that's so beloved. It was just kind of a mixed bag for me. Even though, like, I think the Kings are better right now, it was just such a mixed bag. And I think it's going to take multiple days to kind of unfold this, so like in your heart, right? But that's kind of where I'm at the moment.
There's a lot of layers to this to unpack, from whether it's the Kings fan emotional part of it with Jonathan Quick, or even just the trade and the assets and what they acquired, and are the Kings better, how much better, all that stuff. There's a lot to kind of unpack here. And the first thing I'll say is, and it was probably one of the first things I said this morning, at least on Twitter, is I give Blake all the credit in the world. This takes a set to make a deal like this. Because, and this is exactly how I want my general manager to act. You have to set the emotion aside. Jonathan Quick, let's just be honest, he hasn't been good. And it sucks.
He hasn't even been good. He's been horrible. Yeah.
And it is what it is. He has really done a number on it's not been good, right? And they cannot go into the playoffs with that caliber of goaltending. Now, obviously, Copley was going to be the one that gets the majority of the starts. So I was skeptical, and I had been saying for a month now, maybe however long we started like trade deadline discussion, was any goalie that comes in has to be definitively better than Phoenix Copley, because they're not moving Quick. Where's Quick going? A, who wants him? And B, they're not going to ditch him. He's the franchise legend. I just didn't see this coming. So I'm glad I was wrong in that sense, because this is what you want your GM to do. He's got to make these tough decisions. This is why he gets paid to do it. And he did it. And I give him a lot of credit. And it sucks from a fan standpoint, but Rob Blake's job isn't to appease the fans. Rob Blake's job is to try to asset manage and try to win hockey games and try to make his team as best as possible. And for the rest of this season, that did not include Jonathan Quick. So if we're just, as you said, stripping the emotion away from it, he did the right thing. We can question the return, I guess. I think Korpisalo is probably the best of like the rentals. Like, you're talking like Cam Talbot was out there.
What did you, before we get into like what we think about like the trade from a data standpoint, did you, I want to kind of break it down. There's a lot of people on Twitter like thinking Rob should be fired, and like giving out his personal address to people, like to go like send him hate mail and stuff like that. Like, it's
because of Quick.
Getting pretty ridiculous.
Now, here's the thing. Oh, go ahead.
And I understand that from a fan standpoint, Quick's beloved in LA. Like, it's no joke. And a lot of people think that he should have got better than what he got. which was a phone call. But Rob Blake in the press conference, if people haven't listened to it, said, hey, I was not on the road with the team. I wasn't going to have quick find out via Twitter. I was going to call him right away that he'd been traded. This is the only way that I could have done it. I called Kopi and Dewey right away after that. And then I called Deneau and Ted McClellan right after that. So, like, it was – this is the only way that could happen. I didn't want him to find out from somebody else. I wanted him to find out from me. And that's how it had to go down.
Again, I reiterate what I said. I give Blake all the credit in the world. I cannot even imagine how difficult that trade was to do for Rob Blake and to make for Rob Blake. The phone call he had to make and listen, I don't know what conversations he and Blake's and Quick's team, if you will, have had. If Quick saw this coming, if Quick knew this was a possibility. I mean, I hope that maybe they had these, but regardless, like, Rob Blake's job is to try to make this team better. They have a chance to win the division. They have a chance to have some home ice in the playoffs. He did it.
And I know the Eastern Conference is better, but if you get into 7-game series, anything's possible, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just like he has a chance to really push with how. I mean, in the press conference, he didn't say it was because the West was weak, but let's all call a spade a spade. The West is weak, so we're one of the top teams, and we got better. I think. Yeah. And you look at, and he said that there's been zero contact with his agent about an extension. So even if Quick wanted to play, King's Rule comes in here and says, Quick said he wants to play next year. So if Blake would have been a really bad guy if he didn't give him a deal, like, at what point, there's got to be a point where it ends, right? Because I don't think they would have signed.
There's no good way for it to end, right?
Yeah. Unless he says, I'm retiring, and he retires on top. I mean, there's no way to hide him either. And a lot of fans have been saying this, like, Brownie got hit on the third and fourth line, right? When Doughty gets towards the end of his career, he'll probably be on the third line playing, or maybe second line playing, right? So there's really no way to, like, hide him. Kopitar will probably ride off into the sunset as a 2 or 3C, right? So it really means something different when you only have 2 goalies. Nobody's going to really carry a third. It's very rare. I know New York Rangers did it, and everybody's like, oh, Lundqvist was just as beloved to New York, and they did it with him, but doesn't mean it was a better situation. Right. I mean, Lundqvist said that he hated it, sitting in the press box, like with a suit on all season. Right. So it's just really tough here. And I think this whole situation with Quick is, when you watch a team for this long, beloved players are gonna get traded. It's very rare when a player plays his entire career like Brown or like Derek Jeter or yada yada yada, right? Like, that stayed there the whole time. They're a Hall of Fame type player.
Patrick Kane just got traded.
Patrick Kane got traded, right? So Gretzky got traded twice, right? And so it happens, and it's really tough, and there's really no easy way to go about it. And I think that obviously we all believe that Quick will get his number retired. Quick will get the same ceremony that Dustin Brown got, and well deserved. I don't blame Jonathan Quick for being pissed either. Like what Frank Cervelli said, hey, like, he probably wants to ride out with his boys. Like, hey, I'm fine. I'm not fine sitting on the bench, but at least I'm here with, in LA. We're going to play for a, playoff push. I'm going to be the best teammate possible. And now he's going to, the bandit desert where careers go to die in Columbus, right? Like, their team's not very good. I know they're trying to trade him, and I know the team's on a rebound. I was being a little dramatic there, but it's like, it's just like, does he really want to play for a losing team? Like, probably not. I think he would rather sit on the bench for the team that he grew up playing on than playing for a team that has nothing to play for, right? Because I don't know.
Yeah, probably. I mean, I don't know. He's obviously a competitor. I wouldn't be surprised if you see this put a chip on his shoulder, and if he gets traded and he plays some, his best hockey of the season down the stretch, who knows? But to answer your question before, though, about Rob Blake and the fans and whatnot, absolutely not. Again, if anything, I give him credit for what he did. I applaud him for what he did, because it's a tough thing to do. And I give anybody credit that makes a tough decision like that. I have questions for Rob Blake because of, I should say this, because the deadline's not over, right? We are recording this on what is this, Wednesday night. So there's still all of Thursday and most of Friday. So the deadline is not over. So my concern is, if the Kings think they've addressed the defense, I don't agree, but that's a different discussion, I suppose. I don't have an issue with him trading quick. I have an issue with him acquiring Vladislav Gavrikov for what, at least my interpretation of what they think, where they think he's going to play, which could be totally off. I could be way wrong on that because what do I know? And again, we're 2 days before the deadline, so there is more still to come. So that's wrapping that up by saying that, but I'm not at all upset about Blake making the decision to trade quick or how it was done or anything. I think he did the best he could in a tough situation. I give him credit for doing it.
I thought it was kind of funny. I got vibes of like almost like a boyfriend apologizing to a girlfriend when he was explaining the trade. He's like, I just want to reiterate that I think the world of Jonathan Quick, and he's a legend on this team, but we had to make the trade because we got better. Oh, I just want to reiterate, like he said that like 4 or 5 times, like because he knows he's catching so much heat from Kings fans.
Every fan should appreciate what Rob Blake is trying to do.
Yeah,
I genuinely believe that.
It's not easy to be a GM in general, right? Only one team gets to host the Cup. It's hard to make dynasties, and it's hard to make the tough moves. Yeah,
though these are the tough ones, like trading Carter and Muzzin when you're in a rebuild. That's easy. Easy relatively speaking, right? This is tough. Yeah, this is tough, and I give him credit for that.
Let's get into the return, right? So it's the actual trade. We gave away a first-round pick and a third, and Jonathan Quick. They accepted all of Jonathan's salary. I believe we cleared 1.7, if I remember correctly, cap space for Gavrikov, Vladislav Gavrikov, and Jonas Korpisalo, right? So Vladislav Gavrikov is a defenseman. We'll start with him. 6'3", 221 out of Russia, as you can tell. 6th round pick from Columbus, so really has outplayed his draft stock. 256 games played, 73 points, minus 23 if you really believe, kind of go the plus minus there. But average time on ice 20 minutes a game, so he's a minute eater. Corsi 4 is only 46%. Now you like to dive deep into these stat sheets and all this kind of stuff, Joe. You're a big stat head. Do you believe that Gavrikov can play better on a better team? Because Columbus has never really been good during his tenure there. Do you think he can play better hockey on a competing team as the LA Kings?
I think that is a very good question, and I think that is what the Kings are banking on. Vladislav Gavrikov, and I know there's a lot of discourse on Twitter that I've been involved in, and I want to be clear. I'm not saying the player is valuable for what he does, okay? And I've watched a lot of video on Gavrikov today, looked at a lot of different analytics and statistics, at least publicly available. He is a player that when he's in his own zone, he will block shots. He's an absolute animal with eating pucks, and I appreciate that. He's got a long stick. He's active stick, so he's good at breaking up passes. I actually think, like Kelly, I want to say, had referenced his on Twitter, his slot, the way he breaks up passes through the slot. So in his small quadrant of the defensive zone, I do think there's something that can be effective there. However, and this is where my issue is. So if you're telling me Gavrikov comes into play basically in the Edler spot, okay, on that third pair, I don't hate this. I think it's a reasonable shout for he's a younger, and I think he's played some better hockey in the past. This year's not going well. And I think if you put him on the third pair, you're getting him against not nearly as tough of competition as he has been forced to play in Columbus, not nearly the minute load. So I do think that there can be something there. The tough part for me is if, and I stress, if the Kings' vision, because again, a lot of the talk was about Chikrin or Provorov or some of these other guys that are going to slot into that second left D, right? Because they're a little bit more dynamic. Gavrikov is not, and where he really, really is a struggle is anything that involves the moving part. So he is not great when it comes to defending his own blue line and defending zone entries. He's not great at retrieving pucks, turning around, going back and getting pucks. He's not great at zone exits. So when he does get the puck, does he possess it and does he make a good play and get out of the zone? He's not good at any of those things. Now, is he going to be better in LA's structure and in LA's system? Maybe. I'm just skeptical to the idea that, oh, we've got a guy that's big. He shoots left-handed. We've addressed our lefty. I don't subscribe to that because I don't think he's that. I think he can be a better, younger Alex Edler. Now, if that's the case, so we didn't address the lefty, right? It's still
not long term. Not long term, right? But
Walker, excuse me. So that's where I'm at with Gavrikov. Is like I see what the point of Gavrikov is. I get that. My thought is the Kings already have Alex Edler. So where does he play? So if you're telling me he plays with Matt Roy, that's not a second pair on a contending team. So that's where I'm. And again, we're recording this on Wednesday. We'll see if something else comes down the pike. I don't know. Rob Blake said today in this press conference that he has yet had to have a conversation to see where he fits Gavrikov. He hasn't talked to McClellan about it. He says he's liked or has been okay with the performance of Sean Durzi on the left side, which if you're reading between the tea leaves a little bit, perhaps that's a hint that you may still see Durzi Roy, and it might be Gavrikov Walker. Perhaps you might see something like that. And it kind of pushes Edler down a little bit. I don't know, right? It's that's where it's and if they do that, are the Kings better? Yeah, I think he's but it's marginal. Like that is not a need. If you're swapping Gavrikov for Edler, that's nothing. Like he's younger, and I do think the upside could potentially be better, especially in a better environment. So I fine, but that's like marginal at best.
Don't you think it's as a whole, though, right? So say he does play second pair, and Durzi plays third pair, right shot D, and now Walker is the odd man out. Durzi's back on the right side. You're having, 3 left shot defensemen. Is the overall D core better? Because, I mean, even though Walker has had his spurts this season playing some pretty good hockey, he's back down to the hashtag not my Walker the last couple weeks, right? So is this team overall better with him there? Does the PK get better, right? I mean, at that point,
the PK has been a problem. I don't know. Like, are they better? I am not convinced that this is anything more than a marginal upgrade to the D core, if that. Now, to be fair, the Kings D core has performed okay, so it's not as if like the problem has been in goal. Like the D core has not been that bad, so you could make the case that whatever. But if you're looking at a Gavrikov, think about it. Your second pair D, okay. If you're going against the Edmonton Oilers and they split McDavid and Draisaitl, that second pair may have to see a lot of Leon Draisaitl. Or if I'm at home and I'm the Edmonton Oilers, I am putting Connor McDavid. I might load up that first line, put them together, and let them feast off of Gavrikov and Matt Roy because they will, because they're not good in transition. Gavrikov is not that good in transition. He's good again. He's good in zone, long stick, breaking up passes, blocking shots. That's where he's effective. Not great through the neutral zone. So that's where my concern is. I just don't. It's too early to say because I see the value in the player. I don't subscribe. It's just a difference of philosophy in terms of we need this big guy because he's big. I don't subscribe to that. But I can see the value in the player if he's playing in replace of Alex Edler. I don't know that and your question is fair. It moves Durzi to the right side. Maybe it bumps Walker out, or maybe you play around with Durzi, or maybe you have a Durzi, you have a Durzi Walker pair when you rest Edler. But that's another thing, Randon. If he plays second pair, they've been resting Edler a lot. Do you think Edler's capable of playing a 7-game series in playoffs? Like game in and game out?
mean, you're
You
in
think?
days off though.
With how hard those series are, you feel good about it. And this is why you can sell me on the fact that this is more for Edler spot, because you're going to now have a third pair of Roy Walker, or Dursey Walker potentially, or maybe you keep Dursey Roy and it's Gavrikov Walker. Like this is why it's deck chairs to me. I don't know that the decor is genuinely that much improved. I really don't. I mean, is it better to have Gavrikov than say Tobias Bjornfoot? Fine. So I think depth wise, 1 to 7, or we know 1 and 2, so we'll call it 3 to 7 is better. Agreed. I'm okay. I can buy that. I just think the upgrade here is so minimal on the blue line that it's very that's where I'm at. I don't know if that made any sense or if that helped you at all, or if you have any questions, but that's where I'm at.
No, I kind of agree with you. And like I said, you know a lot more about hockey outside of LA than I do. And you watch a lot more film and stuff like that, being from New York, a hockey place and all that kind of stuff. So I obviously take your advice with what this player is. For me, my next question would be, does the first round pick come more into the play of getting this combination? Do you think Rob Blake was like, hey, we need a goalie and a left shot D. Arizona ain't trading Kirill, so I can kill 2 birds with 1 stone. So essentially I'm trading a first for 2 players.
100%. So I think credit really frankly to Columbus on this, because I think that Columbus probably realized nobody really wants Gavrikov for the price. They probably hoping to get a first. It ain't going to happen. So how do we get a first? We package them. So if you would have traded these guys separately, what are you getting? A second and a third, maybe 2/3. But here they get a first, right? A conditional, right? But as long as the Kings make the playoffs. So I think it was actually good on Columbus's end. And again, I totally get it from LA's end. What are the glaring needs? Lefty, goalie. I think they did better between the pipes than they did at lefty is kind of where I fall on this. I'm just, no matter wherever you put these guys, I just don't know how much of an upgrade the blue line really is right now. I genuinely believe that. And so to answer your question, though, yes, I think the first wasn't for any one of these guys on their own. The first was probably a multiple, like for the first was the package. And also, listen, we got some cap space. The Kings got some cap space by moving quick. So I think that's part of it as well. So, and I don't have a huge problem with trading the first. Like it's hopefully it's gonna be a later first. It's the Kings
hopefully really 32nd.
The Kings really did need to address. I mean, especially when things fell through, or however you want to phrase it, with they weren't going to get Chychrun. So that first round pick. Now you could argue, could the Kings have used that first round pick somewhere else? I guess we'll find out what happens over the next couple of days. I'm not losing sleep over losing the first round pick though, because I do think they did address a couple of needs. It's just how much better did this trade make them is the question.
Do you think they're overvaluing Walker and Edler at this point, to not go out and get really like I can't answer lefty?
I can't answer that because I don't know yet how I'd be better off answering that after I kind of see how Gavrikov fits. So, or after the deadline ends and we can kind of let the dust settle and see everything. It's a tough one to answer now, just because I want to see where they think Gavrikov fits, and I want to see what else happens here over the next day and a half. So I don't know. I think it's like Edler serves he serves a role. It just feels redundant. Gavrikov feels like a younger, fresher, can play every day Edler. That's how I view him. So I just want to see. Do you feel
like Edler could play on the second pair every third game?
No. No.
All right.
Nope.
We got the other part of the trade from Finland is Joonas Korpisalo. He's making $1.3 million. He was a 3rd round pick out of Columbus, 62nd overall. Played over 200 games in the National Hockey League. going 87 and 78 with 24 overtime and 3 shutout wins. Career 3.06 and 9.03. So obviously the base stats not really doing it for me, Joe. But you're looking at a lot of the underlying stats as far as expected goals percentage and making tough saves when needed. Is he a product of Columbus's defense just being awful? And is there some good traits to where maybe if he can get on track with a team that's putting more pucks in the net that they're giving up, that he could kind of resurrect the second spot on the Kings?
Listen, I think here's my thing with, I do think Korpisalo has played, this is probably arguably his best year. He's playing very well this year. He is, for his career, it hasn't been good, or at least not consistently good. As you mentioned, he's got a career save percentage of 903, and that includes this year's 913. So, I don't know what that math is, but he's barely a 900 save percentage for his career. So let's not get it twisted. Joonas Korpisalo is, I don't know that anybody classify him as a good goalie coming into the year. However, he's having a very good season, and I will not deny that. So I was open to the idea of Korpisalo. And I do think he's an upgrade big time on Quick. And at least I think he can and probably will be an upgrade on Phoenix Copley. But we're talking short samples, and we've talked to goalies on this podcast a lot for good reason. It's been rough. I just think we sometimes we'll underestimate. We talk about when players come into new systems, right? Goalies have to adapt too. Okay. And I'm partially stealing this from Kevin Woodley, who had said this on the PDO cast, who does a great job, where it's like they're coming in to a new system, to a new defensive system, a new defensive structure. Like Columbus was brutal, giving up shots from everywhere, giving up shots from the high danger zone, and the Kings don't necessarily give up shots in the same manner from the same places. So he's going to have to adjust to that. He's going to have to adjust to probably a lighter workload. So there's communication things, tendencies of his defensemen. So there's going to be things that he's going to have to adjust to. So while I do think he's an upgrade, I do think he helps add to the depth, and I think he makes the team better. I don't look at this as like, oh, LA got the goalie. They're fine, right? Now they're all set in net. Like, I still think it's probably a Korpisalo, and they'll probably give him a chance to play well and see what happens. But Copley, I'm sure, is going to get some time. I think it improves the goaltending. I don't look at Korpisalo as any sort of like the Kings have their answer in net, if that makes sense.
So based on what you're saying, do you believe it's going to be a 50-50 split going down? Do you think T-Mac gives Korpisalo a chance to prove himself to earn a job? Right? Because ultimately, for the Kings, you want the hot goalie going into the playoffs.
So
right?
Here's the thing.
In order to get Korpisalo hot, you would have to play him. And there's only 20-something games left. So is it going to be a 12-12 split? Like, is he going to, if Korpisalo pitches a shutout, is he getting the next game and that he rides it until it's no longer rideable? Like, how do you're T-Mac. Let's pose the question this way. You're Todd McClellan. Yeah. How would you go about this situation?
So, and this is a really good question, Randon, and you bring up a really good point, because there's 20 games left, and ideally you would have probably played, ideally you'd probably get a goalie like a month ago. Again, I talked about getting him used to these defensemen, how they communicate, their tendencies as defensemen, how they move the puck, the system that he's playing, the system that the Kings are playing in, where his shots are coming from. You probably like him to be a little bit more comfortable. Now, I don't know the logistics here. I don't know when he's arriving in Los Angeles, if he's there, how much practice time he gets. So I may not start him on the next game against Montreal. I may give him a couple of days, perhaps, and then he's in net on Saturday against St. Louis. Maybe that's how I look at it. But again, I guess I would leave that to Korpisalo. I don't know how he feels when he's getting it, all that stuff. But so I would think I would, because you want him to get as much time with the Kings as you can. So you have 20 games left. Like I think he's probably going to play at least half of them, But if he plays 15 of them, well, now Copley's only played 5 games down the stretch. So, like, I don't know. I would say he's going to get at least half the games because I think you want him to get time and reps in the system with the Kings defenseman and the Kings defensive structure.
So let's break this down here as a whole. Now, obviously, we've broken down each individual player. After thinking about it, do you believe this was a fair trade? Do you believe we overpaid? Do you kind of like where this kind of sits? And ultimately, the best question is, do you think this helps the Kings?
I don't think the trade pieces that the Kings gave up, I don't think the trade is unfair by any means. Again, I think they addressed. I wouldn't say that they solved their 2 problems, but they have addressed their 2 problem positions, lefty and goaltending. Okay, they've added depth to those positions at the very least. And I think if you're going to address 2 positions of need at once, a first, you are dumping a contract. A third, maybe you say you pay a third to do that, and that's how the deal shakes out. I think that's reasonable. I mean, the question is, I'm sure that everybody has as well, that first could have been used for something else, but I guess that's kind of beside the point here. Like, in terms of talking to this deal, I think it was fair. I think they got marginally better. I think they got, I do think they improved in goal more than they improved on the blue line. I will definitely agree with that. Is it enough? I'm hesitant to say that, I don't know. I think right now the Kings still line up to play Edmonton if it were to end today, and there's a lot of moving parts that could still change. But, like, do I feel much better today than I did yesterday playing against Edmonton with Gavrikov and Korpisalo? No. I think it's negligible. I think it's a marginal increase, upgrade. Like,
I don't. We got marginally better, but you're okay with giving a first to be marginally better.
Well said. I think when you look at what the Kings were trying to do, okay, I'll put it this way: I would not have done this trade personally. Me putting myself
there you go.
In the
Rob
Kings'
Blake
shoes,
put his balls on the table, and now you gotta do the same.
I wouldn't have, but I can understand the logic here, right? Of addressing 2 positions of need. So that's why I'm okay. And you, again, listen, moving out and opening up cap space is a big deal. So that matters in this. Like, they can still do some other things here the next day or 2 because of that. So when you look at it that way, I get it. And I have no problem per se with the price. I'm not a big enough fan of the players to where this is not the direction I would have. Like, I wouldn't have called Columbus. I would have called Columbus about Korpisalo and try to have those conversations, see if what's the cost on Korpisalo. I wouldn't even mention Gavrikov's name, but that's just me. Yeah. Okay, so there's a little difference in philosophy as well.
I think it's going to come down. I was not a fan of this trade. I think it does help us get better. I think it does. I think it does help us with depth, right? Because we were 1 injury away from Copley being swept in the first round. And everything like that. I think Gavrikov is going to have I think probably will help the penalty kill, just being his size and how well he disrupts and everything like that. That could be a benefit. It's probably going to be a late first round pick. I just wasn't overwhelmed. Like, I wasn't like, if I saw Chychrun come across my phone, like, I would have had a smile on my entire, and it wouldn't really matter unless we trade away my boy Clark. Right. So, like I would have been smiling all day, like, especially, and we could talk to him about it right now, like, especially what Ottawa gave up for him. It seems to me that, like, maybe that price came from the Kings trade, right? Like, they took another piece off the board for left shot D and everything like that. Kudos for Ottawa staying patient, but I mean, I would have easily have rather have given up what Ottawa gave up for Chychrun and still had Jonathan Quick on the team, risking the fact that we don't have goalie depth. But I think you exponentially increase the left shot D with Chychrun over what we got here. Now, I will say we're grading this trade in a vacuum. I think the biggest the biggest thing to look out for is that cap space. Now, if we bring in a center, right, a legit third line center, move Lizotte down, and obviously we were talking about O'Reilly and Monahan and all these players. Well, now we have a little bit more room. What if we bring in a guy like that, and then the team overall is a whole lot better, right? Or we bring in another rental defenseman or something like that. I think we got to wait till the dust settles to see overall what this cap space gives us, because there's no reason to move quick because the best part about moving quick is the cap space.
Correct.
So there's no reason to move him unless you're trying to adjust and make another move, right? So, and normally, as you've seen it in years past, okay, we've traded Alex Martinez. This is the last move. We're no longer in the market for doing anything. Rob Blake was adamant, like, no, we're still moving around, and we'll get to the other trade he made today later on. But I think that the cap space is the most interesting thing. I think it does give us depth. I wouldn't really have given a first for that. I think you probably could have got less, but I think, Rob Blake's like, I'm going to kill two birds with one stone. To me, it's just a really trade in a vacuum, but we'll see what it gives us, the cap space gives us. And I think whether the deadline is a success or failure partly has to do with our next trade we're going to talk about, and probably his career, and then the outcome of the season. Like how well do these players play down the stretch? How far do we get in the playoffs? Sure. Obviously winning cures everything. We can make a deep playoff run. Most people are not going to care about a 1 year first round pick. So we'll see how that comes out and goes forward. Anything else before I move on to the next part?
I guess the last thing, you mentioned Chychrun. I have just a couple of thoughts on that. Like I get it that a lot of people say, well, how did the Kings not match that? Well, they actually can't match that. They can't. They don't have a pick as high as Ottawa. They're not going to have a pick as high as Ottawa. And evidently Arizona valued that. What the question is like, it's just bizarre to me that it took this long. And if they weren't interested in prospects, evidently, like there was really that's a bizarre. And again,
so according to Bill Armstrong, he was like, the most important things was getting a high pick and not having to accept any money. Yet you're accepting all this other people's money and all these deals, like to accept a little bit. Maybe it was the fact he didn't want to accept a player with contract back in return.
So he can't do salary. He can do cap. They can't do salary, real money. They can't do. Yeah. But cap money they can do. So, and I'm going to just say it one last time and be done with Chychrun, but like whatever Gavrikov can do on D, guess what? So can Chychrun. Like he's big, he's tall, he's long. He's not afraid to block shots. He gets his stick in lanes. He's really good defensively. He's really good defending his own blue line. He's incredibly better at Gavrikov in the D zone and as a defenseman. Like unquestionably. So this idea that the Kings wanted more of a defensive defenseman, that was Chychrun. So that's just mind-blowing to me. How
do you think this gets Ottawa in the playoffs? They're only a couple of points behind.
I don't know that it gets them in the playoffs, but I don't think it matters because Ottawa, to me, we talked about this, how I kind of like the fit with Ottawa because Ottawa's not looking necessarily for right now. And the attractive thing about Chychrun is it isn't just for right now. He's for 2 more years after this and potentially more if they pay him. So
that left side of the D looks ridiculous right now.
Yeah, and they've got a pretty good young crop of forwards. That's a pretty good team that's percolating right now. So that's why I kind of like that fit. He kind of slots right into that age group of players. So I think it was a nice fit for the Sens and a great get for them. It's a great deal for the Senators. So I like it. And I would just echo that I agree with you. Like Quick being a part of this deal with Gavrikov, Korpisalo, like I guess you could say they had to do it, quote unquote, because they're getting a goalie back, so they had to move a goalie out. Maybe it's as simple as that, but there's cap space here that's going to get used, I think.
Well, before we go to DraftKings, I circled some questions earlier, and I forgot to get to them, and I think this is part of the trade. And it's been a big narrative on Twitter, and Jacob comes in here. Yonan, thank you for coming on here. I think it's the first question that you've asked us. Appreciate the follow there, buddy. The question is, do we really get better, quote unquote, if it jacks up the room? So, and I think I think this is something that can happen, right? I mean, you have locker rooms. It's known in sports. We've multiple podcasts that some locker rooms are better than others. Some organizations are run better than others. And like when you go into a different locker room, the feel is there. Like, oh man, this is a really run locker room. The veterans are doing it great. Quick was one of those guys.
Yep.
And obviously has strong ties to his brothers in Kopitar and Dowdy and et cetera, et cetera. Do you think it jacks up the room? Do you think that this is enough to blow off the chemistry that it's having, or do you believe that the leadership is too strong, T-Mac is too good of a coach to let this happen?
Again, this is just a guess here. I'm an outsider. I'm not in that room. I've never been in that room, but I'm just going to say that I would trust the leadership group that is Anze Kopitar, Drew Doughty, Philippe Deneau. You know, there's veterans on this team. You know, Matt Roy's been around a while now. Alex Edler's been here. So, like, I genuinely think that the group has the right leadership and they're mature enough to handle this. We're all human, and especially some of these guys have been with Quick for a long time. Like, of course, it's going to have some sort of effect the first week or so here, probably, right? The first practice, he's not there. The first game, he's not there. The first road trip, so that stuff.
You see him in another jersey in Columbus or wherever he ends up.
Yeah. That stuff we're human. But I'm inclined to think the effect on the room, given the leadership group and some of the veterans there, I'm inclined to think it's not that big of a deal. But that's me in Rochester saying that. What do I know?
Last question before we get on here. Jael coming in here. How are the Kings better without Quick? I think we all knew he's been struggling for some time, but did the team get in return something better?
Yes. Korpisalo, like, listen, if you just look at, because there's two things, right? Because you can't start two goalies at once. So, yes, Korpisalo is better than Quick, but like in the games where Copley starts, Copley was starting anyway, so Korpisalo is the backup. So, what's the difference, right? Like, so that's why I think Korpisalo has to play quite a bit here to kind of see if his feet get wet. So that's why he has to be better than Copley too. That's why I continue to say, like, whoever comes in by default is probably going to be better than Quick, but they have to be better than Copley in order to play.
If he plays better than Copley down the stretch, do you think he starts in the playoffs?
Yes. Yep. Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. So yes, he's significantly better than Jonathan Quick. And again, like, we need to be very clear here. Jonathan Quick, as much as it sucks to say, like, he hasn't been good. You could make the case for the argument he's been one of the worst goalies in the league this year. So yes, Korpisalo is an upgrade on that, but Korpisalo needs to be an upgrade on Phoenix Copley, more importantly.
All right, let's get in here to DraftKings, our favorite sponsor and our only sponsor on this pod. DraftKings season never ends with DraftKings Sportsbook, especially this summer, with tons of ways to bet on your favorite sports. You can feel your fandom and feel the heat of the season like never before. Plus, right now, DraftKings Sportsbook is giving new customers a risk-free bet up to $1,000. That's right. Make your first bet up to $1,000, and if it doesn't win, you'll get another shot to cash in. You can throw down on all major action for baseball, golf, MMA, hockey, and more. Plus, same-game parlay, spreads, money lines, over-unders, props. Your betting options feel endless. Do you want to bet the over against Montreal and then Deneau snipes one in against his old team? You can do that. Best of all, DraftKings is safe, secure, reliable. You can deposit and withdraw your cash whenever you want. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Use promo code THPN. Make your first deposit and get a risk-free bet up to $1,000. That's code THPN, only at DraftKings Sportsbook. Minimum age and eligibility restrictions may apply. See show notes for details.
I'll just say, Randon, while we were talking about the trades and what's coming next and yada yada and all that stuff, take it for what it's worth. It could be nothing. Samuel Fagemo and Helge Grans, neither of them were in the lineup tonight for Ontario. That's Kyle Garcia, our Hockey Royalty Rain correspondent, noted that, and Rain insider Josh Schaefer said Samuel Fagemo is unavailable tonight. Did not specify whether it was due to for what the reason was. So take that for what it's worth.
All right, all right. I mean, you're looking at that's a big player. I mean, Fagemo, if it's not injury related, or illness related, I mean, he's a best top 6 player on that team. So we'll see how that shakes out here. Hey, the chat is wild tonight. Thank you guys for coming in here. About 50
Thank
minutes
you,
in.
everybody. It's awesome.
Let's get going into here now. Knowing Joe, and he's a Buffalo savage over there, was probably more excited about this trade than the other one. Eric Portillo, unsigned draftee, plays for Michigan for the Buffalo Sabres. Kings trade a 3rd round pick to get him. Buffalo drafted him in the 3rd round, 67th overall in 2019. Obviously remains unsigned because he is playing college hockey. They can't sign until afterwards. But we've been talking about this all year with goalie depth. They have a guy by the name of Levi who is killing it. And they have 6K who's killing it. So Portillo seemed like the odd man out. Rumor was he wanted to test free agency because he didn't believe he was going to get a realistic chance to play. But the kid's massive. 6'6", over 200 pounds, 225 pounds to be exact, flexible, sucks up a lot of the net. You tweeted out earlier today that Scott Wheeler wrote multiple articles about him and his stuff at Michigan. So if you have The Athletic, go follow a friend of the pod, Scott Wheeler, and get that. But he rated him 6th in Buffalo Sabres prospect pool, which is also rated 6th overall in the entire league by Scott Wheeler. So to get a top prospect for a 3rd round pick in a position of need for the depth of our prospect pool kind of seems like a steal, doesn't it, Joe?
Yeah, it's a great move. Now, I'm sure Kings fans are going to be twitching because the last time they traded for a goaltender from Buffalo who wasn't going to sign, he signed a 3-year deal worth $5 million per year, and he's currently playing in the Ontario Reign. So it didn't work out so well. But that said, this is the type of move you make. This is exactly the type of move that you should be looking to do. He's a big goalie. His numbers this year are not as good as they were last year, but as Scott Wheeler notes in his write-up, he says the team in front of him at Michigan, not nearly as strong defensively, and he thinks that he's played quite well. So I would say that, listen, I see some comments, and I was somebody that, as you know, Randon, has been talking about Portillo for a while now about, hey, if he doesn't sign, this is a perfect fit. Like, get somebody he jumps immediately to the top of the prospect pool in terms of goaltenders for the Kings organization, right? So that is in itself kind of a big deal. But let's pump the brakes. If we learn nothing, he is not the goalie of the future. He is not the next Jonathan Quick. Maybe he will be, but let's not go there. Let's just say, look at it this way. The Kings made a move to acquire the rights, mind you, the rights. He has not signed or anything like that. They've acquired the rights to Eric Portillo, who would become the Kings' best goaltending prospect. Let's just leave it at that right now. Let's not make any proclamations that he's going to be the future, because the last time that happened, it didn't go so well. So good move. I think it's the type of move that the Kings should be doing.
GM Rob Blake did a great job to address the lack of goalies that would have been solid or that would be solid once developed. Still wondering what the plan is for Villalta. He seems to be playing with the AHL. Any future plans for him? This is where it's going to come down to. I think you're going to look at, I think Portillo will probably be in Ontario after the Michigan season.
Could be
this year if he signs. Then you'll have Cal down there. You'll have Villalta and Portillo. So that'll be interesting. Does he get moved to my favorite ECHL team, the Swamp Rabbits, to get some time? We'll see how it kind of goes from there. I think a lot of people believe that he'll compete for a spot in the NHL out of camp next year. I mean, I don't know where he'll fit in. I mean, stranger things have happened. Goalies are freakish. But I think the glaring need has nobody stepped up in the prospect pool from the goalie standpoint. So he becomes the best goalie prospect in our organization. It'll probably be him and Villalta next season. If Villalta doesn't feel like he needs to move on, he only signed a 1-year deal to go to another place where maybe he has more of a pathway. Maybe they envision not signing Korpisalo back, and it's him and Portillo next season as far as Copley is concerned. Who knows how they feel about this? I just think that the team got better. He's one of the best goalie prospects in the NHL. They gave up a third. Realistically, are you going to get a player that might be as good as him? Who knows? But it would take 5 years to develop that guy. This guy's 4 years in college, playing at one of the best universities. That Michigan team was stacked. He had like a 2.14 goals against average with that team. And so I think it's something to look at. Also, the goalie room gets cheaper, right? I mean, so if they're able to move on from Cal and figure out a way to do that, I mean, you get value out of a goalie room there. So I'm all in on this. This kid seems like one of those types of players where he just kind of got pushed by the wayside. I think Devin Levi was like a 7th round pick, right? And just came out of nowhere. So
he's lighting it up again in Northeastern.
Yeah. So you're looking at a player that they didn't really expect to take Portillo's job. So, it's something here that we desperately needed. And I really like the return. I mean, 3rd round pick is nothing in this day and age if you get a goalie that can play any sort of time. And I think you'll probably see him sniff some games next season in and out, depending on injury. And you're most likely looking at him, probably the goalie, probably the starter of 2025, barring any setbacks. I mean, he seems to be pretty much moving forward at a good pace. And I don't know if that's too much in your opinion, Joe, to say, but you don't really move
there. I'm not going there.
You don't really move a 3rd round pick and make this move if you don't think that he has a realistic chance of playing for your team.
I certainly think that they think he probably has a chance to be somebody that's pushing for the NHL in a couple of years. It's just, my thoughts on goalies. And I know the question about Villalta. Villalta's had probably his best season statistically since he's turned pro. So I think he's doing probably about all that he can do. And maybe if the Kings were in a situation where they weren't playing in a playoff position, that maybe he gets a look in the NHL. But obviously they're trying. Every point matters right now, so that's not going to happen this year. But it seems like Villalta's doing his part in the AHL, and he's got a .921 save percentage. Cal Pearson's got a .916. So the goaltending in Ontario has been pretty good.
Do you envision Rob Blake making a big move in the offseason in the goalie position, or do you think he's going to take the season with a lot of these guys? Like Villalta could take a next step up and be the number 2 if he has a really good offseason. You could bring in another Phoenix Copley type goaltender to be in the mix and play in the AHL if Villalta's playing really well. You're going to have Portillo there. Or do you think that, hey, like we signed Copley to be the backup and we need to go out and I can get a dude?
I think Copley was signed, and I think that he's probably got the inside track to be the backup. There's no way. I don't think that they're going to go into next season with Matt Villalta as even a possible backup unless something goes wrong. I think Copley probably could slot there. And then the question becomes, Randon, do they go with a Korpisalo on a 1-year deal? Do they go with go down the list of some of Varlamov and Freddie Anderson? Do they, go that route, Mackenzie Blackwood? Or do they go the Thatcher Demko route? Somebody like that. That's the question, right? And I don't know. And that's, I don't know.
If they don't give Villalta a shot, then when is he ever going to get one?
Well, that's a great question, and maybe this could be Villalta's last time that he's in Ontario. That's a good question. Maybe he looks an opportunity elsewhere. That's because obviously this year they chose Copley, right? There was a decision to make when they waived Cal, and there was Copley. So I don't know. That could be the case, Brandon.
I think Johnny Vampatna here said, "Have I already bought my seats on the Clark train, and now I'm on the Portillo train. There's no way you're talking me out of this trip, Joe. There's no way."
And I do want to be clear because I know I was a guy that talked about Portillo originally, so I don't want to now that they got him. I get nervous with goalies, Brandon. I get nervous with.
I can see the anxiety on your face over there, Joe. But don't be fooled, people listening. Joe is smitten with Portillo, and I think that he believes that he can do some damage if given the opportunity. He just wants to proceed with caution and not throw $5 million his way just yet. So 5-side coming in here. I can't wait next season until Clark and Spence challenge for a roster spot. I like it. I like next season's going to be awesome on that right side of the D. Going to be interesting like it was this year. I think Portillo ultimately good sign. We'll see where he goes after the AHL, whether it's the ECHL or I mean after the NCAA. Is it the AHL? Is it the ECHL? Where he goes in. I assume Rob Blake made this trade with talking to the agent of Portillo, because that would be kind of a major oomph if he goes, oh, well, no, I'm not going to sign with you guys. And we just threw Buffalo a 3rd round pick for nothing. So I assume he talked to the agent. I'm not worried about this getting signed because you don't really make that trade without talking to the guys upstairs there about money. Let's move forward here at the Kings as a whole there, Joe. Obviously, we don't think that they're going to be done. Rob Blake has signaled that they're not going to be done this offseason. You know the landscape of the NHL overall better than I do. Are there any names out there that you believe now are obtainable? Is Sean Monahan going to be available for a 2nd round pick? Do you think he needs a first to be getting, or are you able to get him for Fagemo and a Grans as a rental? Like where do you feel that the Kings, and maybe throw out some names that have been kind of percolating in your mind as depth pieces?
Well, I can tell you that I'm interested to hear when Blake was talking about depth. To me, that just reeks of, and I don't mean reeks in a bad way. It just smells like this is like a forward depth move. So you alluded to a 3rd line center. I can absolutely see Blake looking to acquire a bottom 6 centerman. Now, Sean Monahan's hurt, so I don't know that they're going to go get a Sean Monahan. That's a tough one. I know Russell Morgan's a fan of Nick Bonino. That's somebody that I would expect to be on the move here. I'm genuinely curious on where this goes, because I want to see where Rob Blake takes this, because again, I'm looking at this as if to say, didn't really solve the D problem, but if he thinks they solved the D problem, then they're going to look at a forward. So I see Nick Bjugstad, and he's going to go. I mean, Nick Bjugstad's going to get traded here, it looks like, so he could be somebody that goes. Absolutely. So
I thought Gostisbehere would have been a nice piece, even though he just got traded to Carolina. But I think he would have been a nice piece in tandem with Gavrikov.
Yeah, agreed.
And then you have Gostisbehere as the 2nd pair, and then you have Gavrikov as the 3rd.
Brandon, that improves your decor.
Yeah.
Yes, I very much agree with that. But my sense here is that, and I hope I'm wrong. I actually kind of hope it's still a D-man, but my sense is that it's probably a depth forward. Who that is, it's hard to say. I mean, I know he spoke, I won't say glowingly, but he talked positively about Rasmus Kupari. He talked about how well he's been penalty killing, but Todd McClellan has noted like the 4th line's been caved in a couple of games here and hasn't gone so well. So I would not be surprised to see them look to go for another forward, that's somebody that is a little bit more Gavrikov-y, meaning a little bit bigger, a little bit more of a heavier game. That wouldn't surprise me.
Do you think that Rasmus Kupari would be better on the 3rd line with a playmaker like Fiala?
I think so. I do think the Lions right now are a little disjointed, and I know I would get Fiala off of that 2nd line, and I would move him back down with Lazat. I think Deneau can handle that line and push that line himself. Maybe put Velarde up with Arvidsson or Kalia for that matter until Moore gets back. I would try that. I think that in itself would help kind of balance things out a little bit. I think you're seeing the 2nd line feels a little disjointed to me, and you're not getting the same effectiveness out of the bottom 6. And it's amazing, right? Trevor Moore goes out, and you're seeing kind of the ripple effect that it has. Now there's two things here. One, it happens on a road trip and a tough one at that. But two, like I think that's what happens sometimes, and there's different fits. And I don't think Fiala necessarily fits with Dano and Arvidsson. It was going so well with Lazat. Like I would have just tried to keep that together. That was going great. So that's where I'm at with that. I wouldn't move Kapari up. I think if anything, I would move, if they acquire somebody, you could, depending on who it is, you could move Lazat down and then put that new acquisition in the middle. But I have Lazat, like I said, he's if especially if Fiala's on his wing, Lazat, I'm kind of in on Lazat as my third liner there. I kind of like him.
To me, the lines of field, all of them have felt disjointed. Even the first line. I don't think the first line. I mean, I understand that Kopi scored 4 goals and all this kind of stuff, and Byfield, but it just seems like they've been a little disjointed as well. I mean, I don't know. I mean, maybe it's just the stretch of the road trip just being a brutal road trip, and they go through a little bit of a skid here. But I'm not asking for it to be thrown in a blender. I just think that it needs to be tweaked for sure.
I think you would see that though. I genuinely think if you there's two things here. One, you're on a road trip, so the home team's going to have the matchups, and so that Kopitar lineup is going to get. I assume they're going to get the toughest matchups they're going to face, rather than when they're at home, they're going to have slightly easier matchups. And as you mentioned, Kopitar's coming off a 4-goal game, so I think the issue for me is more right now with the rest of the lines, where it's just something ain't clicking here. Maybe it's just the road trip, maybe whatever, but something ain't clicking. And I think part of it is, again, you just take that one piece that is Trevor Moore out and just things get jumbled. And, I think that can happen sometimes.
Yeah, and we'll see how that works out. It's going to be interesting. 2 more days, so all the smoke and dust settles. Hockey Royalty will be doing a live feed. Joe and Russell will be on there. I will be earning money at work, so my analysis will not be given on there. But they're going to be breaking down not only the Kings trade. I'm sure they'll talk about the Gavrikov trade again. Getting Russell's opinion, any future Kings trades that break, all the stuff that goes across, the West, the Eastern Conference. I think they're just going to break it down at all. I mean, because it's been wild. Kane in New York, yada yada yada. I mean, it's just, the East looks retarded right now. Like they are just, excuse my language, but they just look stacked. Like it just, it doesn't seem like anybody out of the West is even going to compete in the Stanley Cup.
And they're not done. Those teams are,
No.
I'm sure, like the Toronto's got a first-round pick to still play with. Like they're not. I don't think these teams are done over there.
So we'll see how this goes on, and whew, interesting hockey. You love trade deadline time, you hate it. A lot of emotions. Ultimately, always going to thank Quick for his time in LA, and we'll have a full podcast segment dedicated to his time here when things kind of settle and really acknowledge what he's done for the LA Kings. So be there for have your phone available at work if you're at work, and get all your trade deadline info from Hockey Royalty. We're doing it live there at Friday. We'll send out a tweet exactly for the start time there. You can always follow us at hockeyroyalty.com. Follow all of our Twitters are there scrolling across the bottom. Hockey_royalty at Rando Commando 24, at NHL Russell, at JW Paterino. Please smash that like button, subscribe, hit the bell so you get notifications when we're going live. Hey, tell your friends, man, we're trying to get to 1,000 subscribers on here on the channel. Just get on their phone, press subscribe for them. They never even know it happens. You help us out. Really appreciate it there. Joe, always a pleasure. It feels good to go back to these making it rain days. Obviously, we miss Russell, but get a little one-on-one time, a little boys' night out, that type of thing, and throwback there. It feels good. Russell will be with you guys on Friday.
Yes,
man, Kings starting to move in the right direction. I really like it. I really enjoy it. It makes hockey interesting again. It was always kind of depressing to see, like, oh, are we going to get enough picks for this player or that player? Now we're making moves. So it definitely did something different there. So appreciate you guys in the chat. Chat was freaking lit tonight. Tons of guys throwing in comments there. Really appreciate all the support from you guys on this pod. And as always, go Kings go.